This week, we've seen resurrections, revelations, and even resolutions. Let's dive right into what's on the pull list. Kicking things off, we're going to start with Escape number 5, written by Rick Remender with artwork by Daniel Acuna. So, in this issue, the Naranian army is closing in on Milton as he's narrowing his scope on the Titan cannon and kind of the end of his mission, right? So, Milton has kind of like holed up with his family and he's learning more about the nature of this war and the nature of the ramifications of every action that he is doing, right, in this war in the name of peace. But what does that all mean? He's kind of forcing remenders, forcing his protagonist to kind of face that, face the realities of what that means. And it's kind of like making Milton walk this tightrope between nihilism and hopefulness, right? And that's a really cool aspect to be exploring within this character. The expressiveness conveyed in Acuna's artwork is like kind of vital to this book, though. It's vital to my experience with it, right? It really rings true for all of the characters and how they feel and all the raw emotions on their faces as basically all of them are going through turmoil all in these different aspects. And we learn more about just the people that are, living within these cities as Milton is now navigating his way through them. And when you see like the heartbreak and the turmoil on their faces and seeing Milton's reaction to them, it just makes it all the more worthwhile. Escape continues to be a banger. I'm loving this book so much. And it's really about that raw emotion that brings it to the forefront. Next up, we have Marvel Knights The World to Come number 5, written by Christopher Priest with artwork by Joe Quesada. So T'Challa is putting together a team to basically take on Ketema for potentially the very last time to, kind of like rule over Wakanda. And one of two things are true for this book. Either Priest delivered the most concise script of any issue of this series, or my level of understanding for this series has evolved. Either way, I enjoyed it. More importantly, I understood it. This was probably the best issue of the series so far, and it's really ramping things up now. It's the penultimate issue. We're coming to an end of the World to Come mini series that was, and I gotta say, it's kind of gotten better with each issue, but it's been very challenging. While I enjoy Quesada, he's one of like my all-time favorite artists. I feel like he's sacrificing visual storytelling for cinematic looking splash pages in this book. It's very beautiful and altogether totally not helpful for the reading experience. What I do like here is kind of the incorporation of the greater Marvel Knights universe, right? We have Daredevil training T'Challa, an older T'Challa, to kind of take on Ketema. We kind of find out what happened in the past, why there's no other heroes that are trying to confront Wakanda and everything that's going on is to become a bigger world power. So it's pretty cool. There's a ramp up that's happening here. I really enjoy this issue in particular, but I feel like the ending is really going to determine how I feel about the series overall. All right, let's talk Skin Police 2, number 4, written by Jordan Thomas with artwork by Daniel Gates. So in this issue, the dupe revolution is afoot, and we have this revelation that the government cover up and the rich and powerful kind of like allowing dupes to continue to happen, even though it's been outlawed, has been, ongoing, right? But what side is Ekis going to be on now? He was one of the skin police, right? The people that were tracking them down, but now he knows way more about the nature of everything. I dug how the story ended. This, if we're dealing with a dystopian future, this felt very justified in its conclusion for the main character. The best part, though, while this is an ending to the story, it leaves enough meat on the bone to be able to come back to this world. And if there's the right story for the right time, I really hope that this team does come back to get to tell some more about the story. There's a lot to explore in this world here, and I feel like we're just kind of looking at the tip of the iceberg. I really enjoyed Skin Police overall throughout the two volumes that we've gotten here. I think that this ending was very clean, very concise, very earned, and it was a really fun journey to take through and kind of like understand more about the world that they were living in. Next up, we have Sorcerer Supreme number 1, written by Steve Orlando with artwork by Bernard Chang. So we have Wanda Maximoff kind of taking on the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme at the whim of the vestments that were Stephen Strange's, right? The cloak of levitation. And the Vishanti are none too happy about what's transpiring here because the mantle wasn't necessarily handed down to her. She wasn't chosen for it. She was working on the will of the vestments. So I didn't necessarily have high expectations for this because Orlando has never really done it for me. I've tried to read a lot of their works in the past, and something just doesn't click, doesn't work for me like it should, right? For to bring that level of enjoyment to an all-time high. This was decent though. I think what's going to happen here is if you're a fan of the Scarlet Witch character, this will totally work for you. But if you're not, I'm not sure that this is really going to light your world on fire. What I can say is Chang's artwork though is really nice. What's working maybe against it or not on parallel with it though is the color. I feel like it's has this really garish digital look that really kind of has this reminiscence of like the early 90s when they were starting to first toy with digital colors. It feels out of tune, right? There's parts of this book that feel like it wants to be lean into a classic comic book and parts of it that don't, and the color definitely doesn't. What I can say though is that I kind of like what they're maybe setting up here for Wanda Maximoff here. She's, she's not at the whim of the Vishanti, right? So they're going to be setting up some cool back and forth between those things, and she's not going to be working at the I don't know, at the behest of anyone else except for herself. So there's some cool magical things that could be happening here. So if you dig Scarlet Witch, I would definitely check this out. Next up, we have Ultimate Endgame #1, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Jonas Scharf and Terry Dodson. So, first and foremost, we have two Ultimate books that are coming out this week, Ultimate Endgame and The Ultimates. My recommendation is to read Endgame first before you dive into Ultimates. Having said that, what we see here is that the Ultimates kind of breach the Maker City and time has totally run out, but nothing really is what it seems. So the best part of Camp's approach during his time with this iteration of the Ultimate Universe is that you really kind of never know what to expect, and this is very much in that train of thought. I mean, there's some characters that are, revealed here that you would never anticipate being part of the Ultimate Universe, and they haven't even been toyed with in the 616 for a very long time. The art duty is split mostly between Scharf as he tackles kind of like what's happening within the city and with the maker, and Dodson as he focuses on everything outside of the city and everyone that's kind of like dealing with things that are not trying to traverse back in and take on the maker head to head. I like the duality between those things because the Dodsons bring everything that the Dodsons do, right? You have an expectation for their level of quality that they bring with the artwork, but Scharf takes a different approach here, and we've seen him do work on things like the previous Ultimate book that came out, the Ultimate One Shot, and there is a level of creepiness and eeriness and just like bizarreness that he brings to the Maker, and I gotta say, it really works. It makes you really dread every single time that the Maker is on the page. It really, really works. I think this is ramping up to be a cool end point for the Ultimate Universe. We'll see if that really holds. But what I can say is that this kind of got me excited for what's going to come here with the end of everything that's coming. All right, now that you've read Endgame, let's go ahead and talk about The Ultimates #19, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Juan Frigeri. So we now know that the Maker is coming back. The bubble is now kind of coming up over the city, and the Cabal's onslaught ensues as Janet Van Dyne double cross comes full circle now. This was a really cool issue as we get to see the history of Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym in this Ultimate Universe, what makes them work, and what drove Janet to work within the Maker Circle. This is kind of everything that's happening outside of the Maker City, right? So we get to see the other Ultimates as they're continuing their assault, as the Maker still has, the Frost Giants attacking his army, like all of his Cabal's, armies basically coalescing and trying to take out the Ultimates. We get something at the end of this issue that's so obvious but so deliciously out of the scope of what I expected that it just totally worked. It's one of those things where you're like, I can't believe I didn't see that coming, but when you get it you're like, "Oh, of course. Why wouldn't they incorporate that?" Really great execution on this. I think of the two, I may have enjoyed Ultimates more than Ultimate Endgame, but that's because of the consistency that people like Dennis Camp and Juan Frigeri have brought to this book through and through and through. So I gotta say, this one really worked. Next up, we have The Undead Iron Fist #4, written by Jason Liu with artwork by Fran Galan. So Osiris in this miniseries has resurrected Danny temporarily as he must take on a possessed Luke Cage and potentially the very first Iron Fist. So it was a short week, right? So I had to take some chances. And I got to say, when it comes to chances, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I didn't have high expectations, and I'm jumping in at the very end of the story. Is that fair? No, probably not. But hey, it is what it is. I just wanted to see what this book was about. And I have to say, this was a fun beat 'em up kung fu kind of book. Lou has worked with Zdarsky in the past, particularly on their comicsology work, and he brings like a lightness to the story. He keeps it snappy, keeps it smart, keeps it moving. But I have to say, the strength of the book, though, comes by way of Galan, who was an absolutely great choice to take on these characters and the nature of what was happening in this book. He brings the same exaggerated nature that made books like Pine and Merrimack work so freaking well. And when it comes to the kung fu and the special moves that Danny Rand is doing, it just absolutely sings here. I think I'm gonna have to like dive back in and read the previous three issues here once I have a little bit of free time here, because I gotta say, when this wrapped up, it kind of worked for me. All right, remember how I said that it was a light week and I had to take chances? Yep, that's right. It's time to talk about X-Men: The Age of Revelation finale number 1, written by Jed McKay with artwork by Ryan Stegman and Netho Diaz. Here we go. So Xavier and Apocalypse and the X-Men make their final play on Revelation to stop the plans for planetary unification. Okay. Is it fair to judge an event that I've almost entirely skipped and I'm only reading the end cap? No, not really. But here we are, and I feel justified in my choice to ignore the X line of comics completely. This was clunky, both narratively and artistically. When exciting things are being written, the art felt mundane. When the art had a chance to build on some cool character moments, the narrative felt really forced. Not sure what the X line of comics needs right now to do, but if this was the big swing that they were going to take, I gotta say, I'm going to remain on the sidelines here. This did not work for me whatsoever. I felt like they were toying with ideas that have already been played with in the past to a lesser degree. And I feel like this is something where, I don't know, it feels like pandering. I feel like everyone that didn't like the Krakoa era, they're like, don't worry, we got exactly what you're wanting. And they're doing watered down versions of everything that we've already gotten in the past. I don't know. I'm bored. I feel fine with totally skipping the X line. If I'm wrong, totally tell me what I'm missing here. But I have to say, this was my least favorite comic that I read all week. All right, let's get positive here with my runner up of the week. And we're going to talk about The Tin Can Society number 9, written by Peter Warren with artwork by Francesco Mobili. So, as the friend group faces certain death head on, we kind of get what is maybe the final iteration of the mech technology developed by Johnny's previous company. This has been a long delayed book, particularly the last couple issues here. We've had months off, but I have to say, I feel like it was worth the wait now. The narrative has us living in the head of Kasia for the majority of the issue, and I feel like it really works. It's like a living epilogue of what's happening simultaneously to the actual events of the ending. Was the ending seriously hampered by those delays? Yeah, sure, of course. Like, it had to have been, right? But did it hurt my excitement? A little bit, a little bit. Did I still thoroughly enjoy what we ended up getting, though, without a shadow of a doubt? I feel like all the strengths of this book still continued to ring true. It still felt like it brought forth those kind of Stephen King esque qualities at the very end. Not like horror tropes or any aspects like that, but the way that he develops characters and the way that he kind of can end a story, right? This does bring, it brings an end to the entire storyline that we've gotten here. I feel like the characters really worked. They really sang true and they stayed true to their personality types. And I love the way that they really kind of put a bow on this. So Tin Can Society was really, really great. I'm glad that it's all done now. And I think it's going to read really well all together. And with my top comic of the week, let's talk Lost Fantasy number 6, written by Kurt Pierres with artwork by Maxi Dallo and Luca Calzalagueda. So Blackheart investigates a lead on his father's murder, and a magical biker gang may have some answers for him. This was a really, really great issue. I feel like the strength of this book is when it kind of like walks that tightrope between fantasy and crime detective stories. And it leans on that detective investigatory nature in this book really, really heavily, and it works so well. Dalo's art is definitely different than Casa Lagueda, but it works, specifically in that action packed biker bar scene. I like that we kind of get this mishmash of everything that's happening. I've said this for like every issue, but I'm going to keep saying it because it continues to work. The melding of these two things, right, fantasy and crime, on paper you don't think that it would work. It's worked previously in things like Fables, but I feel like it leans more on the fantasy. This leans on the crime way more, and I'm enjoying it so thoroughly. The other thing is that I really enjoyed that Casa Lagueta got to come back here for the last couple pages and maybe start to get further enveloped into the storyline. I feel like Casa Lagueta and Pierre's really work well together, and I want to see them on full issues yet again. This was a fun issue. I really like where it's going. I really like how the fantastical portions are starting to take hold a little bit more, because now they're traversing into that world as they investigate the murder. And I'm really, I don't know, excited to see where Blackheart's going to be going as we move forward here. All of this stuff put together, though, made it absolutely worthy of Top Comic of the Week. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.